Two different kinds of evidence exist for where Jamaica's enslaved population actually came from in Africa. One is the paperwork, the shipping manifests, the embarkation records, the actual ledgers written by the traders themselves. The other is DNA, the mitochondrial ancestry of Jamaicans alive today, tested and published by actual geneticists. Here's the part nobody expects. Those two kinds of evidence disagree with each other. The shipping records say the single biggest source of enslaved people brought to Jamaica was the Bight of Biafra, in what's now eastern Nigeria. But when scientists tested the DNA of living Jamaicans to trace maternal ancestry, the Gold Coast, modern Ghana, came out on top instead. Not close behind, on top. That means somewhere between the ship and today. The story the paperwork tells and the story written into people's actual bodies stopped matching. Tonight we're going to take 15 Jamaican surnames and run them against every major coast of West Africa the trade actually touched. Senegambia, Sierra Leone, the Gold Coast, the Bight of Benin, the Bight of Biafra, and West Central Africa, and see which side of that disagreement your name falls on. Between the 1650s and the end of the legal trade in 1807, ships coming into Jamaica loaded people from 6 major regions of the West and West Central African coast. Each region wasn't just a location. It was its own cluster of nations, languages, and cultures. The Gold Coast meant mostly Akan-speaking people. The Bight of Biafra meant overwhelmingly Igbo. West Central Africa meant Congo and Mbundu. These weren't interchangeable to the enslavers, and they aren't interchangeable in the records either. Two things shape which coast a name traces to, which parish it's concentrated in, and when that parish was actually being settled and supplied with labor. Because the coasts that dominated the trade shifted decade by decade. A parish built up early leans toward different coasts than a parish still being cleared in the final years before 1807. 15 surnames, 6 coasts. Let's go. Drop your surname and parish below. If your name isn't one of the 15 tonight, tell us anyway. This is exactly how we build the list for the next one. Subscribe if this is new to you. New records, new surnames every week. Quick note before the countdown. The pinned comment has our Jamaican Surnames ebook. 100 authentic surnames researched in more depth than any single video can cover. The full list of names inside is in the pinned comment too. So check if yours is there before you buy anything. Every purchase keeps this research going. 6 coasts, 15 surnames. Let's go coast by coast. Senegambia and Sierra Leone, the smallest share. This region supplied the smallest proportion of Jamaica's enslaved population of any major coast. Real, documented, and often overlooked because the numbers are so much smaller than the Gold Coast or Biafra. If your surname lands here, you're carrying one of the rarer origin stories on the island. Not because the record is uncertain, but because statistically, fewer people came from here in the first place. Booth, an English surname, plain and simple. Booth, a temporary shelter. No parish on this island shows a strong concentration of it, which itself is a clue. Names that are thin and scattered rather than clustered in one estate are more often tied to the smaller, more scattered coasts like this one than to the Gold Coast or Biafra, where whole plantations were sometimes stocked from a single voyage. Wint, same pattern, spread rather than clustered. By elimination, as much as by direct evidence, this is the coast the record points toward. The Gold Coast, the DNA winner. This is the coast that wins when you test living Jamaicans' DNA, even though it doesn't always win in the shipping ledgers. Predominantly Akan-speaking, and famous among enslavers of the time for a reputation for organizing resistance, which is part of why so many of Jamaica's rebellion leaders and maroon communities trace back here. Trelawney, home to cockpit country and some of the deepest maroon history on the island, leans hard toward this coast. Barnet. Trelawney, tied to the Barnet estate, one of the parish's oldest and most powerful properties, sitting right in maroon country. The historical pattern for that parish points squarely at the Gold Coast. Codling. Also Trelawney. Same parish, same pattern, same coast. A rare English surname clustered tightly enough in one place that the maroon country signal carries through clearly. The Bight of Benin, the thin one. This coast supplied Jamaica in smaller numbers than the Gold Coast, or Biafra specifically, and honestly, the record for these two names is thinner than anywhere else on tonight's list. We're including them because the parish pattern points here more than anywhere else, not because we have the same level of confidence as Trelawney or St. Elizabeth. Haywood, no strong estate concentration found, included here on parish period grounds, flagged as the weakest attribution of the night. Cooper, same situation, an occupational English surname, scattered rather than clustered, tentatively placed here by elimination. The Bight of Biafra, the paperwork's winner. According to the actual shipping and embarkation records, this was the single largest source of enslaved people brought to Jamaica. Overwhelmingly Igbo, with the heaviest waves arriving between 1790 and 1807, right before the trade ended. This is also where tonight's strongest individual piece of evidence lives. Knight. Here's the one with a name attached to it on both sides of the Atlantic. A Liverpool slave trader named John Knight operated ships that drew over 40% of the people he trafficked from the Bight of Biafra specifically. One of the most Biafra-heavy operations on record for that port. That doesn't prove every Jamaican knight descends from his ships. Surnames on the island almost always came from the plantation owner, not the trader who delivered the cargo. But it's a striking coincidence sitting right there in the historical record, and worth knowing either way. Nembhard. St. Elizabeth. In 1815, just 2 years before the register this channel is built on, more than 250 enslaved Igbo people in St. Elizabeth's parish, around Black River, organized a plan to kill every enslaver on the island. They elected their own leaders, titled King of the Igbos. The plot was discovered before it could happen. That's not folklore. That's a documented conspiracy in the exact parish and the exact years this surname is concentrated in. Gentles, also St. Elizabeth. Same parish, same period, same coast as Nembhard above. Ebanks, Hanover, a parish with its own well-documented pattern of heavy Biafra importation during the trade's final largest decades. Forbes, Manchester, one of the youngest parishes on the island, only carved out in 1814, just 3 years before the register. A parish settled that late was being stocked with labor right in the years the Bight of Biafra dominated the trade above every other coast. Kearney, also Manchester. Same late settlement date, same period, same coast as Forbes. West Central Africa. Congo and Mbundu, roughly 1 in every 5 people brought to Jamaica came from this region. The Congo and Mbundu peoples of what's now Congo and Angola. This region dominated the earliest waves of the trade before the Gold Coast and Biafra came to take over later in the 18th century, which means the parishes that lean this way tend to be the island's oldest. Macalla. St. Catherine, one of the earliest and most established parishes on the island, settled and supplied with labor long before Manchester or Trelawney existed as parishes at all. The demographic pattern for that early period points to West Central Africa more than anywhere else. Whitehorn. Same story, different parish. St. Andrew, settled even earlier, since the English invasion of 1655. Same logic, same coast. The unresolved one, Channer. This name doesn't sort cleanly. It shows up in more than one parish, in more than one period, without a single dominant pattern. That's not a failure of the research. That's the record being honest about its own limits, which is more than most sources like this ever are. So, which one wins? The paperwork or the DNA? Here's the honest answer. Neither, fully. The shipping records tell you who got on the ships. The DNA tells you who survived, had children, and whose descendants are still here 200 and some years later. Those are two different questions that happen to sound like the same question. The gap between them is the real story. Babies who didn't survive, diseases that hit some regions harder than others on the Middle Passage itself. Generations of people whose lines simply didn't continue. The disagreement between the ledger and the DNA isn't a mistake in the data. It's a record of something that actually happened to real people, written in two different languages, ink and inheritance. Drop your surname and parish below. And if this helped, the ebooks in the pinned comment. Full list included, so you can check before you buy. The coast your family came from is only half the story. The other half is that they made it far enough for you to be here asking.